individuals who have helped make this evening possible, including the Wish Foundation Fund of the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta, Jane and Clay Jackson, and the Willett Group. As always, thank you for making these very important programs a possibility for us. We'll head over to the galleries after this evening's program is finished. So, as a reminder, hang on to your program tickets, because that will get you into the museum, where you can view our wonderful new acquisition of Julie's painting titled Gamma, Painting in 4 Parts, Part 2. We're truly privileged this evening to be joined by Mehretu, whose extraordinary career helped to rekindle a revival of painting at the turn of this last century. Her work has been exhibited and collected by museums around the world, including the High Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, as well as the Deutsche Guggenheim, the Detroit Institute of Arts, the Louisiana Museum in Denmark, the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Castillo, León, and Tate Modern, and this goes on and on. For me, uncannily, Julie's work has been included in some of the most important pivotal exhibitions of her generation, including an exhibition titled Poetic Justice, which was the title of the 8th Istanbul Biennial in 2003, which is where we first met, actually. I don't know if you recall, but my partner and I met you at that time, which was a thrill for us. So from that exhibition, multiple exhibitions, fast forward to Documenta 13, which was presented in 2012 in Kassel, Germany, where the cycle of paintings Mogama was premiered. As I mentioned, part 2 of that cycle is on view upstairs in the Wheeling Skyway, and later, when you come back, of course, multiple times to see that painting, but come also to see Julie's multi-part print titled Auguries, which was commissioned by New York's Metropolitan Opera, which is on view in the lower level galleries as part of our Driscoll Prize exhibition. It feels funny to talk about you in the third person. Julie, no, that's okay. Julie was born in Addis Ababa in 1970, raised in Michigan, and attended the University Sheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, Senegal, before earning degrees at the Kalamazoo College in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and then at the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence in '97. She was a resident of the core program at the Glassell School of Art at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, as well as the acclaimed Artist in Residency program at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 2001. She's received numerous prizes and awards, chief among them the MacArthur Genius Award and the Berlin Prize from the American Academy in Berlin. Now, I'm not a religious person particularly, but I do believe in spirits. And they always tend to visit me in taxi cabs, it seems. And so it was this morning when I came back into town, a lovely, beautiful spirit, the man who drove me here, I asked where he was from, and he was from Eritrea. And so I mentioned the program tonight and Julie's name. And he mentioned to me, he told me how to say your name in his language, Mehretu, and that your name means blessing. So we're doubly blessed tonight to have you here, and I welcome you. Please help me welcome Julie one more time.
Thank you, Michael. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Michael Shapiro as well, and also Liz McClure and Mary Goodman Gallery for helping with this whole. But I'm very happy to have a painting here, be here, and visited the collection before, and that's a great contest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to jump right in because we have a lot to talk about.
Okay.
By the way, we have a series of images that Julie has selected that will be cycling on the screen, and we may or may not refer to them, but they're there to provide some context to what we will be talking about eventually, and that is the painting on view in the galleries. But before we get there, I came to your work a little bit late, I have to say. I first saw it in 2003 in Istanbul. I knew of it, of course, but that was the first time I had seen it in the flesh. And a colleague and friend of mine, who's a former curator of the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis, did an exhibition of your work, drawing to painting, and described your work, quote, perfect metaphors for the increasingly interconnected and complex character of the 21st century. And for me, that really encapsulated how your work tackles the sort of unfinished histories of the last century and those incipient histories that we anticipate or that are just beginning to unfold. So my question, I guess, is, how do you do that?
It's a lot of expectation on an artist.
No. Well, I guess my real question is, when I first saw your work in 2003, it seemed as though you had a fully formed visual language or a fully formed set of tools in this language that has, since that time, evolved and grown, but it seemed that language really did address a moment that we were all experiencing at the turn of the century.
For me, so many, all of that language emerged very organically and very much in its part. I mean, I was always interested in keeping, in a sense, my way of making within the realm of abstraction. And I was interested in that because of its ability to deal with complexities without being definitive and being able to ask open-ended questions. And then I was also interested in the history of abstraction and painting and the confrontation with the painting. And there was this form that I worked within very kind of organically and naturally and fluidly, kind of emerged slowly. and then as I was investigating myself within that language, other elements started to enter the language, like architectural elements or the drawing started to mimic looking like aerial views of maps and cityscapes. So as that continued to evolve, I would ask other questions that started to come into the language based on the demands of the work, but also what kinds of investigative questions I was asking about the work. So it was very fluid, organic evolution. I think, sometimes some pieces can have a certain resonance with the moment, and other times they stand within a different place in time. But I think that it's just this kind of montage aspect of bringing in these various elements together to kind of cooperate in a way to have a different type of pictorial experience.
What did your work look like before 2001, while you were kind of figuring your path out from?
I think it was a lot more spare. Like in 1998, 1997, the work was very small marks that plotted and charted their ways around some kind of blank terrain. And it felt very layered. Some of the paintings had 9 layers of drawing, and you could see every layer. It was this evolution of the space, almost like looking into an anthill or something. It was like you really plot out these, but it didn't have it mimicked a map space, but it was really on a no terrain, a blank space. And so that's one of the reasons that I started to, in Houston, bring the architectural language into the painting, and actually also make them bigger so that you had a different interaction with the picture, and a physical kind of interaction with the painting.
Were there moments during your studies from 91 in Dakar to Providence?
No. The work I was doing, not at all. The work I was a very young, interests are very similar in terms of who I am. I was working with a batik artist learning his form really, when I was studying in Dakar. And what I was really studying there was the language and the culture and history, politics, and economics within the university there, struggling to keep up with these students who were there. So it was a very different kind of experience.
It's interesting, the university is named for a renowned historian and anthropologist who studied pre-colonial African cultures.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really interesting now in the context of your career.
Well, my desire to go to the school that I went to is really because of this program they had in West Africa. And, having been born in Ethiopia and raised in the States, and we went back with my family to live in Zimbabwe when my father was doing work there in 1984, which was 4 years just after the revolution and after Mugabe. was really building a different future in Zimbabwe. And Mugabe at this point was the darling of the West and the darling of like the future of what could be the old Rhodesian state. What was the old Rhodesian country? So, and it was the country that could set an example in opposition to South Africa. So most of the Rhodesians who couldn't handle this change left and went down to South Africa or to Australia, and where apartheid is still very much in effect. And so, having grown up during this time from parents who lived through the process of the decolonization of most of the continent, through to their effort to build a very different future in their country, to that falling apart, and then the effort of a new development and being a very active part of an emergent new country and its development. We grew up with this very, a certain kind of, I was informed by a certain type of African internationalism that was very exciting and very kind of, very exciting and it's seductive in a way. And so, I really wanted to go back to West Africa, which has been, Dakar is a big part of that, as a center, if you will, in that scene, the same way that Abidjan would be, or Congo was and Kinshasa was in a way for music. And so you have these places that were considered really core, Harare, Kinshasa, Addis Ababa, Nairobi, Dakar. And so I wanted to, if I could be there, that's where, one of the reasons I went to school. So there's this attraction to that possibility. So, and that was him. That man was an example of that.
You mentioned music just now, and I'm skipping ahead because I know we need to talk about Mogama, but the painting upstairs always seemed to me, when I first saw you working on it in the studio in New York, musical, orchestral, and I think of them still in that way. And you use musical terms to describe the painting upstairs. Do you think of music? Do you think of the formation of your paintings in terms of that kind of marshalling of different systems and forces?
Yeah, I think they have very strong sonic elements to them, in terms of their structure, but then also how they are composed with all those various parts. One of the best compliments I had on the work was Jason Moran, a composer, contemporary composer, wrote me after he saw the paintings in Castle, the four of them, and he took a woman back, the director of an opera that's commissioning him, or director of some type of creative festival or something in Germany that was commissioning him to do something, and he took her in and showed her the paintings and told her, from what he told me, this is a score. And that was like one of the most, for me, such a high compliment, because I really think of them as participating and having a performative element to them when they're being made, but they have a very strong sonic element for me too. They kind of resonate in that way that you can almost hear them. And so, yeah, music, and I listen to music a lot. So it plays a big role.
In time too. I'm thinking about the sort of idea of collapsing time and space in your work, but music being a durational form of art, but so is your painting.
Yeah. And it takes time to actually experience these paintings, those slow experiences.
Do you think that they unfold and before your audience, or is it the other way around, where your audience is drawn into your work? Is it a combination of that you desire in one's experience of the work?
They really do unfold, I think, as you participate with them, as an audience. Excuse me. Element to the work where you can actually see the coalescence of like these marks and the architecture of these various bits, but they really come forward in your experience of them, how you experience them as you with them. It's an individual, very subjective experience. I'm very interested in that. Sorry.
Can I get you? Sorry. No, well the overlapping, the layering of information too is something that's very important. An idea that you discussed when describing your work, you often return to the idea of the palimpsest, where you've got a surface with layers of information. Much information has been erased. Erasures are important, just as important as the sort of the accretions, those things that are layered on top. And that seems to me part of what you described just now as well.
Yeah, I don't think of them as ever a time being a tabula rasa, right? They're always informed by what's coming before them. And in terms of not just in my work, but also in terms of in their deeper evolution within the paintings. So none of this architectural information that's in the work is coming from without a past. It's all referencing a very strong political, social orientation, and is being built from within that context.
Right. And the architectural elements, we were upstairs earlier and were identifying some of the different sites that are referenced in our painting, but these are sites that are architecturally like a palimpsest. Actually, you can use the word palimpsest in terms of architecture, right? Where a building demonstrates its evolution over time, different cultures at different periods of time that this building has grown or been added to. And so that these buildings demonstrate sort of the geopolitical forces that go to shape the nature of a place or the political sort of thrust of a given place or society.
The architectural information was really interesting working on these because each city has a very specific political history. It's either a colonial city, or like Addis Ababa really wasn't. It was a very kind of it was occupied for 5 years during the 40s, the late 30s and 40s, but it was very much a most of the other cities were colonial cities or with European cities. And the structure of the city, the information that goes into these buildings, who they were colonized by, and what creates that social political context of that, participated in the hybrid nature of or the kind of relationship between all of them. And that to me was super interesting. How do you find, in most of the European cities you would have these kind of obelisks that were actually taken from the continent, and then you see them being settled. And then you'd have these places within the colonial cities that were actually these kind of references to the colonizer that were within the square. So these places that were these contradictions within social histories that were like because of the historic nature of the city.
References to the colonizer in terms of power structures.
The power structure. But that was always present, it's always there. So a city like Cairo, whatever historic role you see that having has played out there in terms of a period of time, whether it was the British or Mamluk architecture from the past, or forms of type of emergent modernism that happened in the late 40s, 50s, 60s with a different idea of where Africa could go, where these cities could be, to a relationship to the Beaux-Arts and the kind of evolution of that form and conversations with Paris. So you really see these informing the evolution of the city.
Have you discovered in your research how, say, a square with modern architecture, which you think of as more, utopian, progressive ideas, and then squares with architecture that's neoclassical, how these different kinds of signs or messages have turned out in terms of today, what the political reality of today, how that architecture did or did not have a role in these
It's interesting because each building around any of these squares were built for very, very different, for their own reason. Very few times where they really thought of as facing this public plaza. I mean, you have the Mogama in Cairo that was thought of that way, but most of the other buildings on the square were built with very different intentions. And in a way, those buildings that had that desire and intention kind of embedded in them, they actually became, they actually in a way became very authoritarian and were operated in a way that wasn't necessarily very humanist. Not that that's something we really care about, but that's these buildings are operated almost in a sense in opposition to that. So to me, it's the contradiction that I'm interested in within those structures. And then the montage effect of time and place that are then situated within to create this vessel of this social type of social action, social desire that you think of as a public plaza or public square, or even the idea of that type of concept. You know, the idea that this is a place where you can actually behave and act out. It's called, somebody said to me in an interview, First Amendment rights. You know, like,
Yeah.
and there's this construct of this place as being a vehicle for that, and it's really, you know, these squares have been used in all kinds of ways, but for propagandistic purposes, all the way through to horrifically, horrific public executions, and to social relief and social places where real social changes occur. So I'm interested. I was really thinking about looking at all of that and in its container of the other levels of time and place that are suggested by the architecture.
And what's your perspective, your personal perspective in terms of these histories? I mean,
in terms of like,
is it more objective? I mean, I think there was a question we had earlier this evening about politics, and and there was a wonderful little article written in a local blog describing your practice in terms of kind of a 5,000-foot aerial view of the realities of the world today, and that being an objective sort of account-taking, really, and knowledge building.
I think it's a very subjective form of accounting, like not accounting, if you will, like very immersed in the moment, trying to make sense of it, and trying to make sense of it, and trying to make sense of myself within it. And I think that that's the way that I approach even taking on the content in the paintings that I do, but also within the market, within the evolution of the marks and the interest in the work. We're really about kind of walking into every contradiction that comes up within my understanding of the world at play. And I feel like in many ways the role of the work and me are to not actually take any kind of objective stance for any of the situations. I feel like it's constant emerging reality, and I question every gesture that participates within an idea of way of behaving. I think it has to really be this constant emergent creative process of how to be an active, creative, alive agent in the world today. How does that happen? And I mean that politically and socially and economically. How can you constantly be changing and shifting your understanding of what's going on by participating, but also digesting the world differently?
I know that for me, when I first knew of your work before I saw it in Istanbul, and I can speak for a couple other colleagues, one thing that struck us about your work was that you introduced the idea of social agency as an integral part of a painterly practice at a time when video, new media was emerging at that time as well, where social agency had a played a more prominent role. Would you agree with that?
In terms of film and video.
Yeah. But in a painterly
you were able
practice,
to, in painting it was harder to.
I think so.
For me, it was always about trying to find a way to make paintings that I could deliver be interesting to me, but also the paintings where I was trying to make, like I said, sense of myself. And so I had to find a way to. I was very committed to painting and drawing because it chose me really, and in a way, it was the contradictions I was interested in. That's the reason I stayed away from anything very figurative or representational. And so I think that a lot of political work was emerging in text-based work and in other forms of performance. You could deal with these political social realities with film, video, and these forms have been happening since the early 90s, the 80s. You had this kind of, and 70s. You had
Documentary.
Yeah, you had many ways to deal with social and political desire and issues, and I was very interested in painting, and because that was, like I said, this form that I was very connected to, and that I felt chose with the way that I could work. So I had to find a way to do that within painting for me that could work and try and address some of these other issues that I was interested in,
Right.
that were important to me, that are crucial to who I am.
Absolutely. The idea of the third space is often discussed in terms of your work as well, and you've used the word emergent often, and third space is a sort of emergent space.
Yes.
I would describe
Yes,
it
yes.
as in that way. And this has become a very important idea in your work over the last 10 years, or is it?
It's really come into the work, and it's actually someone who's here in the audience, Maggie, who came up with this term in a way when discussing my work with me. She came to the studio visit, and it was the articulation was her articulation was much more complex in terms of talking about third space, and she had a very specific kind of argument that led to contemporary sublime and some other aspects that she was describing. But for me, what really resonated in just talking with her in the studio was these two forces: the force of the architectural and the rational, and the kind of the way of trying to make sense of what was happening in the studio and the world, right? These two things at the same time, which is a very Cartesian approach, and then the organic, intuitive approach to generating the images and generating the painting and kind of following a certain type of intuition and getting lost in making. And that's how the marks generate and become and shift and have changed over time. And also the structure of the paintings. So within the combination, the collision of these two, there's this other form that has started to really emerge since erasure, since the Guggenheim paint, since the Manacera, which was really 2007, first painting that really that took place in 2006, 2007. So since that time, slowly, this concept has been becoming more and more clear, or kind of an emergent part of the work. It's been a big part of the most recent one, even more so. Yeah, so that's the trajectory of that. I love this idea of the term because it also has a very political kind of orientation as well. You know, when you think of third world, third orientation, third right.
Thirdness.
Thirdness. There's this other form of, it allows for this other possibility, third gender, I mean, whatever it is, it's like this. And so, you know, this idea of this other dimension that could exist within this, not from the addition of two, but this collision of two where something else is possible.
Right. I know many people are probably thinking or wondering when we're going to talk about Ogama. So maybe specifically, let's talk about Ogama. The cycle. I call it a cycle of paintings because I think of it again operatically. They were produced were they commissioned for Documento, or were they works that we were in progress of making?
No, they were really very specific for that context and within the idea of thinking of that type of context.
In Documento is an international art exhibition that happens every 5 years in Kassel, Germany, and is an exhibition that is characterized by a very rigorous sort of conceptual approach where artists are invited to participate on a platform, a global stage, if you will, to explore issues that are very relevant and to the contemporaneous realities of the day, and also to put artists in context, an historical context, but also one that's contemporaneous. So when I first saw those paintings, I was invited to come visit them, visit you and your assistants in your studio in Harlem, and it was this massive wall